So let's look at a few points that got added in the second edition of the book. I recorded the first edition, as I said, and now I'm adding bits and pieces by comparing the second edition to the first edition to see what points are newer and need to be added. So one of the things that is kind of interesting is to think about all the things we do now that are advantages in many ways. For example, everybody wants a lawn, and there is, when you think of sports, there are some sports that are played on lawns, like I don't know, cricket or soccer or football, American football and so on. And obviously maintaining grass becomes very hard, and even big office complexes or homes that have lawns spend a lot of money to maintain them, a lot of water, and often people are penalized for using water when there is no water and so on, and a lot of fertilizers are put in to make the lawn very healthy and green and maintain it and so on, and that results in all kinds of nutrient runoffs that result in coastal eutrophications that we talked about, the state change where you add nutrients, so many nutrients that a phytoplankton bloom happens and the zooplankton don't eat it up, and then the phytoplankton dies and falls, and the aerobic bacteria microbes eat it, and then they chew up all the oxygen, and the other species can die from this kind of anoxia or hypoxia and so on. Why are we talking about it? Because artificial turf came about as a solution to the lawn problem. It's very easy to bring it in and roll it through the whole field, and voila, you have a very nice looking lawn very quickly. And there are lots of debates about American football being more dangerous because of the slipperiness of the artificial turf. And the bigger part is that even though it's convenient and maybe saving some nutrient pollution and so on, it's actually producing so many small microplastics pieces that kids are actually getting exposed to this, being, accidentally ingesting it, or now instead of nutrients flowing into the water bodies, you have microplastics flowing into the water bodies and ending up in the ocean, in the fish, and so on and so forth, right? So we are always doing something that has advantages and then also many unintended consequences. The other thing that the book adds in chapter 3, which is where I'm putting this podcast as an addition, is a new title, Our Growing Awareness of Sustainability Challenges. It was called The Boundaries or whatever before. I forgot what we called it. Let's see what we called it. I shouldn't be too lazy, but yeah, it's called Our Sustainability Challenges, whereas the title got changed, the title of the chapter got changed to Growing Awareness. Our growing awareness of sustainability challenges. As I mentioned before, this author, Per Becker, likes to call everything our, even though he's from Sweden, I think, and Global South would not want to be part of this our unless responsibility for historic climate change is owned up to by the Global North, right? But the interesting point made in the new edition, second edition, is that Stockholm plus 50, so 1972 was the first Stockholm that we discussed. After 50 years in 2022, there was a meeting in Stockholm, and remember, we were just about coming out of the COVID, and there were still lots of restrictions and people working from home and economic slowdowns and so on. Whatever was the reason, the Stockholm plus 50 did not get as much attendance as the previous ones, and it grew steadily from 72 to Rio plus 20 in 2012. And Stockholm 22 was much lower in many ways. This is a nice picture of the first summit in Stockholm 1972, the Human Environment Conference, which was the first attempt at trying to worry about environmental impacts of humans and sustainability and so on, and many resolutions came out of that. And many protests have grown since, so this is Rio plus 20, looking at a slogan that says we reject the greed economy, and now there is more and more protests that we have talked about elsewhere already, and this indicates especially younger people beginning to feel anxious about their future and getting some awareness, education on all the human impacts, and they are not always sure what the solutions are and how they themselves may be part of the problem as well in terms of consumption. If teenagers are running around with the latest iPhones and protesting, should they be blamed for buying a new iPhone? Well, it depends on how you think about it. If we decarbonize the system, then maybe it's okay to keep buying new things, but till then, how careful can everybody be? Willpower is a limited resource, and you cannot track everything, how much meat you are eating, how much you're traveling, how many clothes you are buying, how much food you are wasting, energy waste, water waste, and of course iPhones and so on. So let's read a bit about Stockholm 2022. Essentially, following the idea of revitalizing interest in sustainability by commemorating earlier events, the most recent World Conference returned to Stockholm in 2022. The first edition was written well before this meeting, so this has been added. So in Stockholm, it started in 1972, and it was referred to as Stockholm+50. After steady growth over time in the size of the previous world conferences, this time it did not manage to attract the same attention and interest, maybe because of COVID or maybe other reasons, that there were many smaller meetings before this. So around 10 heads of state or governments heads of state or government participated, which is only a tenth of what Rio+20 mustered, and a bit more than 90 government ministers attended as well. All in all, 155 states were represented, which only comprised 80% of the 193 member states of the UN at the time. And a lower proportion than ever before attended this World Conference. Several dignitaries were still speaking at the main event. 5,000 people participated in person, and hundreds of side events organized by the organizations from the state, market, and civil society spread across the city of Stockholm. Moreover, the World Conference itself was preceded by a series of 5 regional consultations during the preceding 2 months. So Asia and the Pacific, Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa, Europe and North Africa, Europe and North America, and West Asia, which allowed thousands of people to voice their opinions, concerns, and engage in the dialogue. These preparatory processes, as well as the main conference and several side events, had an explicit focus on youth. Arguably more so than the previous world conferences. The focus of the Stockholm+50 conference was to highlight the urgency of our sustainability challenges, to get leaders to accelerate the implementation of the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, which is also a new thing that I will read off quickly. The conference had 3 thematic leadership dialogues, in addition to a series of more conventional plenary sessions dealing with the procedural matters and allowing a general debate primarily comprising state representatives describing past, present, and future commitments to sustainable development. These leadership dialogues focused on reflecting on the urgent need for actions to achieve a healthy planet and prosperity for all, the timely theme of 2, achieving a sustainable and inclusive recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, accelerating the implementation of the environmental dimension of sustainable development in the context of the Decade of Action, which the UN launched in 2020 to accelerate the efforts towards the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. COVID-19 has had a mixed effect when it comes to climate action sustainability, because the economy suffered a lot by the restrictions and slowdowns, and economic stimulus funds were put out by pretty much every country, and those funds were focused on reviving economies, consumer spending, rather than climate action or sustainability. And COVID itself had, of course, led to a lot of ordering online because of the restrictions, and that came with lots of packages, and we increased plastic consumption by a lot. So when a crisis hits, climate action and sustainability tend to take a backseat unless we begin to decarbonize the system. So it always comes down to solutions. The word cloud for Stockholm 2022 was mixed. So leadership dialogue, opportunities, sustainable development, but not jumping out really. Lots of things played out: international meeting, prosperity, healthy planet, United Nations conference, and so on and so forth. The Sustainable Development Goals, 17 of them: no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institutions, partnerships for goals. So these are now playing out quite well, in the sense that they always come up big projects or adaptation and mitigation efforts. Everything is now measured for their compatibility with the SDGs, which is a good thing, and many of them have very good co-benefits as well. No poverty, of course, can reduce terrorism and conflicts, and gender equality, women's health and children's health, family standards of living or quality of life goes up, quality of education for women acts as a very effective contraceptive, fertility rates dropping everywhere, and so on and so forth. Sendai 2015, we already talked about it a bit in one of the previous podcasts in this chapter, so I'm going to skip it, but basically it was motivated by the Tohoku earthquake, Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, which created quite a scare with the damage to the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, and led Japan down a path of, getting scared of nuclear after relying on nuclear because they don't have much space, they don't have much coal or oil and gas. They have to rely on nuclear, and the land they have is very small as well. So this was Sendai Airport after 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. So earthquake happened, tsunami happened, tsunami hit the nuclear power plant. Officially nobody died from the nuclear accident itself, but there were some related deaths that came because of what happened. Okay, so very scary scene here, of course, and the scar from the Fukushima accident really is still working its way through the Japanese society, and even Germany and other countries got scared and said, we will not go nuclear, we'll just burn more coal if necessary, which is what happens. As we have discussed before, nuclear is a renewable energy. There is enough uranium to run nuclear power for a long time, but the waste, radioactive waste, needs to be taken care of. Plus, people are very scared of nuclear power plants, and I have podcasts elsewhere in energy and so on under climate change, where we are looking at how nuclear may be getting revived by the energy demand for AI, and who's using most of the AI? All the big four, right? Amazon, Google, Apple, Facebook, and so on. So they are looking to fund various ways of bringing nuclear power back into action with modular reactors, replacing water with other things and liquid metals and so on and so forth. Fusion, of course, is getting a lot of funding as well. So related to all this, in the sense that our boundaries of sustainability, our awareness of sustainability challenges, etc., span all the sectors, especially energy and decarbonization. Okay, so this is just an addition to the previous version of the book that I used to record the whole course, and so just adding these as missing points from, or new points made in the second edition. Okay, so this chapter is basically concluding, so the next podcast is reading off the conclusions of the chapter before we move to chapter 4 of part 1, State of the World. Okay, see you in the next podcast.